hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 205 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. So I realized that one type of movie that I really haven't gone into, films that deal with addiction. I don't believe that I've mentioned any to this point, and that was not necessarily by choice, but there are many people in real life who struggle with various forms of addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's gambling, whether it's cigarette smoking. And the other day, I watched a movie that I had been instructed to watch many times by various people, going back to the Bev's Gym days. It's a movie called Beautiful Boy. And I believe it was made by Amazon, I think. It's not really important who it was made by. But it is a film. To call it a movie about addiction and recovery is a stretch. It's a film about addiction. And we can stop there. And there are a lot of different movies over time, when you go back in Hollywood history, that dealt with and deal with addiction and some levels of recovery or not. And it's to Hollywood's credit that they started making movies earlier than you would think, dealing with these kinds of very serious themes which kind of ground us, and while watching a movie, we say, geez, this movie is not just to entertain. They're telling a very serious story here, and not in a way that we're normally comfortable with, that they don't give a shit about the fact that we are not comfortable watching this movie. We're on edge because we don't know where it's going. Now, the first large-scale Hollywood films to deal with addiction, the first one, The Lost Weekend, that's an almost 80-year-old movie. Ray Milland plays an alcoholic. The film doesn't shy away from the horrors of alcoholism and what the disease can do, not just to the person who is afflicted, the person who is perhaps spiraling downward at a rapid pace, but the family, the people around them, collateral damage. There was a movie with Frank Sinatra, directed by Otto Preminger, Man with the Golden Arm, dealt with drug addiction. It was one of the first movies, Hollywood, big star, and Ray Milland won the Oscar for Best Actor. He was so good in that role, and he normally didn't play roles like that. But Man with the Golden Arm was Frank Sinatra and dealt with drug addiction. And then you move forward to the early 1960s, and you had Days of Wine and Roses, which was a movie about alcoholism, but it does it in an almost just a horrible, terrifying way, where Jack Lemmon is, boy, I love Jack Lemmon. What a great actor he was. He was so good at everything he ever tried. But Jack Lemmon in that movie plays a man who, he drinks too much. He's kind of a functional alcoholic who then maybe becomes an actual alcoholic. But the woman that he is with, the character played by the wonderful Lee Remick, she doesn't really drink. And he turns her onto it, and it turns out that it's worse for her than for him when the time comes to say, we're throwing our lives away here just because we want to have another drink. Shouldn't do this. That was something that took a lot of guts for Hollywood to do, to allow a filmmaker, was it Blake Edwards? I don't know who that was. You know what, I gotta look that up. Days of Wine and Roses, highly recommended. It starts off as a light comedy and then goes, 1962, then it goes very, very dark. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was Blake Edwards. You see, I should trust myself. I should trust that when I throw a name of a director of a seemingly random film from 60 years ago, the name didn't pop into my head for nothing. You need to trust that the reason why the synapses are connecting they're connecting because I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, those are movies, all three, that are now more than 6 decades old. So it's not a new thing for Hollywood to try to tackle these very serious issues within the context of movies with a big director, in the case of Days of Wine and Roses, an all-timer in Jack Lemmon, and really wonderful actress in Lee Remick. And Sinatra, Otto Preminger, great filmmaker. He did Anatomy of a Murder also. He also played, was he Mr. Freeze on Batman? Geez, I'm going to have to look that up too. Otto Preminger, there's a movie with Halle Berry called Introducing Dorothy Dandridge. It was one of those passion projects that usually they go wrong. You know, John Travolta, passion project was Battlefield Earth. But Halle Berry campaigned to get Introducing Dorothy Dandridge made. And a terrific actor, Klaus Maria Brandauer, was cast as Otto Preminger because the director, Otto Preminger, and Dorothy Dandridge, they kind of had a fling, whatever. But Otto Preminger was a great filmmaker. And let me see, Otto Preminger, Batman. Who did he play in Batman? He played Mr. Freeze, and that's what I was going to say. Damn. Boy, how about do a comparison of Mr. Freeze, Otto Preminger, and Arnold Schwarzenegger in Batman and Robin. Winter has come at last. I love Arnold, but I'm sorry. That's the worst performance of his career. I hate that movie. I love all the actors. In Batman and Robin, but the film is just not good. Not good. But yeah, Otto Preminger, Man with the Golden Arm. So watching Beautiful Boy, it doesn't do what you think it's going to. It doesn't go where it's expected to. And what the filmmakers try to balance is the need to show, and by the way, Timothy Chalamet plays the lead. Well, he's not the lead. The lead is played by Steve Carell, the father. It's based on a true story. And they balance the tough love approach with the, you're my son and I have to run to protect you at all costs, with the suffering of the afflicted. And I feel like the movie, they were trying to make it incredibly depressing and difficult to sit through for the audience, but they don't necessarily show the suffering of Nick. That's the Timothy Chalamet character. And it's a stylistic choice, but I feel like there was a better movie that could have been made from this material. I recommend it. It's strong stuff. But when I think of other movies that deal with addiction, there's more of the characters struggling to stop. And we as the audience, especially if we're a little bit older and maybe understand such things as disease states and different kinds of illness, and mental illness sometimes plays in. I was reminded of what I believe to be Robert Downey Jr.'s finest performance in the very good adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis. He did American Psycho also. But in the 1987 adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis' novel, Less Than Zero, which was a huge best-selling book. And the movie is pretty close from what I understand. I didn't read the book. My dad may have read it. I'm not sure about that, but I didn't read the book. But people who are familiar with it, it's close enough. It's not like they went off on their own island to make a movie that had nothing to do with the book. Because sometimes you do get that. We say, well, this isn't in the book. Neither is this. Neither is this. Neither is this. But Robert Downey Jr. in that film is the second lead, as Timothy Chalamet's Nick Sheff is the second lead in Beautiful Boy. The story is filtered through Steve Carell as a father. Is his name David Sheff, I think. It's filtered through his prism, his viewpoint as a father who was a single father, and we're led to believe did a great job raising Nick. He was not an absentee father, And it's not the kind of thing where the son develops an attitude and hates his father's guts. I was thankful they didn't go in that direction because we've seen that kind of thing before. But in Less Than Zero, we see most of the young people in the film do drugs, but there is a difference between occasional user, recreational user, and full-blown addict, to where the person will potentially go into cardiac arrest if they don't get their fix, that their bodies are so addicted to it that, you can keep them from it, sure, but what if that kills them? Like, it's all bad. But what Less Than Zero does, the angle it goes down, that Beautiful Boy really doesn't. It's strange, because Less Than Zero is not, to me, nearly as depressing a movie to watch, even though the endings of the films are completely different. You would say it's like flipped. But we see Downey Jr.'s suffering and wanting to quit, or we think he wants to quit, but there's more, it feels more real and less of us putting our hands on our head saying, oh my God, what the fuck is he doing? And both films certainly get across that you may choose to take a drink, you may choose to take a hit of marijuana. Oh, it's a gateway drug, whatever. But at a certain point in time, a person who does not have that gene, if they decide, I really don't want this, they can quit. And they are not going to suffer physiological ramifications if they choose to quit. They are not going to simply seize up and die, or go into cardiac arrest, or some other horrendous outcome that we know now is plausible. I didn't like the Sandra Bullock film 28 Days Later. And I like her performance, and she sells it. That was another movie I thought didn't take addiction as seriously as it otherwise could have. I don't want to go into too many spoilers though with Beautiful Boy, but it does a lot of things right, and I guess it's a great near miss is how I would describe it, because they could have, maybe they didn't realize just how good an actor Timothée Chalamet actually is, because it's hard to explain to people who only maybe know him from Wonka or, some of his other work. He reads his lines as if he is not acting. And it's the fact that he has a perfect voice for it. That's one thing. And he has a very expressive face. I remember he had practically a cameo in Don't Look Up, and I thought he was next to DiCaprio. I thought it was the best thing about the movie. And I had not seen him in anything. I didn't see the movie that he did with the now notorious Armie Hammer, which came out before Beautiful Boy. And people started buzzing about this guy right away. There are certain times in Hollywood where a young performer, where people start buzzing about a particular performance. Leonardo DiCaprio in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, people were saying, holy shit, with that and with This Boy's Life. I didn't see either of those films until home video and or HBO, the movie channel. And you say, well, what's the big deal? I didn't know what was the big deal with Timothée Chalamet until actually seeing him. And the movie's about addiction, but he's underutilized in this film. I feel like the movie would have been better if it had simply focused on him and not his horrendous experiences are filtered through Steve Carell as the dad. And I love Steve Carell. I love The Office. Watched the whole series. And I'm a very big fan of the movie that he did with the one with Jim Carrey and where they were comedians. Burt Wonderstone, where he plays a Vegas, a Vegas magician. And Jim Carrey plays a rival Vegas magician. But that movie, unfortunately for Steve Carell, Jim Carrey steals every scene that he's in. But I like Steve Carell as a film actor. I thought Date Night was pretty good. A Friend for the End of the World, it was okay. The problem is, and this is specific to people who've seen The Office, there are moments in this movie where Steve Carell yells. And I'm sorry, it sounded like he was yelling at Toby in The Office. And it completely took me out of the movie. For people who have not seen The Office, they're not going to have that reaction. But that is the danger of an actor being so closely identified with a certain character that it can pull you out of the fiction. And each time he yelled in the movie, I laughed. And I'm sorry, I'm ashamed, but I couldn't help it. I laughed. And the actress, is it Amy Ryan, was the woman that he pairs off with on the show The Office that he, ends up getting with. She's in the movie, and that also took me out of the fiction. I don't think that was a good idea to cast her. Maura Tierney as David Sheff, the father of the kid, as the wife, the second wife, phenomenal. She's really good. And she gave a similar performance in The Iron Claw, the kind of long-suffering spouse, although there isn't as much of the long-suffering in Beautiful Boy, it's more recent suffering. But that's a dynamic the movie got correct. The relationship between Nick and his stepmom. You see that she is not a random person in his life, that he loves her. And all the stages of addiction, it's in the film. And the moment, it's actually Maura's best moment in the film, where she basically tells her husband, you have to stop chasing him down when he relapses. We know that the odds of a relapse are always going to be high. We can't always run to the rescue. There is a chance we will lose him, but if we keep bailing him out, we've already lost him. She doesn't say all that, but that's the implication. This is not something that I would have thought about as a younger person, even knowing friends who were going through difficult, trying to wean themselves off of drugs or alcohol or anything where they need to stop. I mean, I knew people who became addicted to sports betting, and you can go nuts. I can remember as a much younger person when we called it rotisserie league. Rotisserie league. Now it's just fantasy football, fantasy baseball. But I knew people that, to me, took it too seriously. And I was always asked, and there's nothing wrong with it. The concept is fine. I'm not anti-gambling. I mean, this trophy over here is a trophy I won for a poker tournament. So I'm not anti-gambling. I used to play blackjack. But when it comes to sports betting, the two problems I had. First problem is, statistically speaking, the only people who make money are the people who are collecting the bets. And the problem with fantasy leagues in particular, and why I will never do them, is a reason that is pretty logical and obvious. I'm a fan. And I remember, this is in the mid-2000s, in Huntington, when I was going to Outback Steakhouse almost every night, because my dad's place was across the street. And I'd schmooze and hang and watch the Yankee game and mingle and have a lot of laughs. And a bunch of the guys, we'd watch the games together. And I think it was 2000, and it could have been 2006. And the Yankees were a home game against Tampa. And one of the guys that worked there's a man on first with 2 outs. The Yankees are about to win another game. In 2006, the Yankees, big season. They won 97 games. Flamed out first round of the playoffs. Fuck the Tigers. But this particular game, they're up by 3. There's 2 outs and a runner on first. And we're ready for the end of the game. The guy standing next to me starts screaming for Aubrey Huff to hit a home run. What are you doing? Wait, what? In order for him to win his week and win, a couple of $1,000. If Aubrey Huff had hit a home run in that spot, he was going to win his week and win, or whatever it was. It was something that if Aubrey Huff homered, he was going to win a significant amount of money. This guy was as big a Yankee fan as me. He was at a fever pitch. He was in a sweaty panic. No, thank you. I'm a Yankee fan. I am never and would never, ever, ever, ever root for Mariano Rivera to give up a home run. Yeah, but we'll win the game anyway. Fuck you. No, thank you. So I've seen and known people with addictions of all different kinds. And unfortunately, the two addictions that you can live with, one, workout addiction, and another is coffee. And in general, what people say with gambling, where it can become addicting, you find the least amount of money that you can wager and get that runner's high from. And there are people who have found, for example, that vaping, it eases the need for cigarettes. We don't know if it's how much worse or better it is for the lungs. But there are people who find that very strong coffee, multiple times a day, helps them to cope without alcohol. And maybe coffee will fuck up their stomachs. I can't tolerate strong coffee. I got a little weak stomach. But whatever you can do to help yourself, one day at a time. And that's something the movie gets right. And Less Than Zero, Robert Downey Jr., Andrew McCarthy, Jamie Gertz, James Spader, speaking of The Office, Robert California, one thing that Less Than Zero doesn't get into is the concept of you don't actually make a full recovery. Every day is part of your recovery. Every day that you are clean is part of your recovery. Less Than Zero doesn't really go down that road. It's a different kind of story with similar elements. Beautiful Boy does go into that. And the idea of 600 days sober, that's great, but when you relapse, you start from scratch. And in a weird way, it's like when people go off a diet. Just because you went off your diet, it doesn't mean you throw in the towel as much as you might want to. And people I know who have struggled with addiction issues, I don't know any of them that don't say their lives are greatly enriched, even as brutal as it is to go cold turkey and to just stop. Their lives have been enriched. And it is worth the struggle, because the struggle on the other side is so much worse. As many movies and TV shows and literary works have shown. See, there are times movies are telling us what to think. They tell us how to feel or what to feel, but that they're telling us what to think. But in the case of a film such as Beautiful Boy, they are imparting the idea that there is no such thing as an easy recovery, but that has to be the goal for all parties. Even if you have to temporarily almost turn a blind eye to your beautiful boy, because that's part of the recovery. And there's a moment in this movie, this is not really a spoiler, which gives you the idea of the risks of what you would call the tough love approach, of not always running to your child when they are hurting, whether or not they did it to themselves. The two parents are at a Al-Anon meeting. And a woman who is in their age bracket, 50s, whatever, is telling a story about her daughter who has just passed. She believed the daughter could not be saved. She had tried every possible approach, from coddling to racing to the rescue to tough love and back again. She died. Those are the risks. And the movie gets those details right. And I do appreciate what Steve Carell did in the performance. It was just those moments of him screaming that took me out of it. I almost wish that they had him deliver those lines in a normal cadence and normal volume. But what you see is his character goes through the stages of grief, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, where he starts off almost in denial. Because his son, after all, he looks like Timothy Chalamet, that's great. But his son is very intelligent. He's an actor. He's a writer. He is a very artistically minded. He's kind to his, I guess they're step siblings, half siblings, whatever. He's just an all around good person. And Steve Carell's character, and this is the real life people who are still around. I guess that's a mild spoiler. But he doesn't believe that his son could possibly be defined by his illness, his disease. And it takes a long time for him to come around to accept this. This is not a passing phase. This will define his existence one way or another. What's it going to be? We don't know. And what the movie points out is that it really is one day at a time. Try to have a good day. And when you're hurting, you have to have people you're willing to call and pour your heart out to. And certainly it's easier today with cell phones. It's easier to get in touch with, a contact person, a sponsor. And it's much easier to find meetings today with everything on the internet. My understanding is that most, even reasonably large towns will have one or two meetings running at various, whether it's at a church or shelter. There is more help per capita now. At least that's my perception. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But that there is more help per capita now than ever. And when you watch a movie like Beautiful Boy, whether you think it's a masterpiece, because an old friend of mine, Keith from Bev's Gym, he watched it and he said he watched it again, and he's a father. His son was very young at the time, though, like 10 or 11. So he wasn't personally affected by the story. But he immediately said, this is like top 5 best movies I've ever seen. I put this up there with Casablanca. Like, it moved him that much. Because as a father, he was imagining, and that's not a criticism, that's a reality. If you're a parent and you watch a movie like this, how could you not wonder what it would be like? What would I do in that situation? My child is strung out on crystal meth and alcohol. And we've been down this road before. He's been to rehab. He was in recovery twice. Now he's calling me, asking me to pick him up. Don't take me back to rehab. I want to come home. With your help. I need your help. What would you do? It's a moment of personal growth in the film where Steve Carell doesn't immediately leave to pick him up. And at a certain point, he has to say, Nick, this part of the journey is not on us. This is on you, one way or the other. You got to show us something. You have to show us something. Now, mild spoiler, one of the unfortunate elements of Less Than Zero is that the character of Julian, that's the Robert Downey Jr. character, he actually does show something. Maybe it's too late. Maybe his body has been damaged beyond repair, and Beautiful Boy gets into that as well. The idea of nerves can be, adrenal gland, like there are certain parts of the body that we're not supposed to be, you're not supposed to introduce crystal meth into the human body, and there are certain things which get fried, which may not come back. So there's overlap from that perspective. The movie made an impression on me, though, and certainly got me thinking about other films that deal and dealt with addiction of various kinds. So Beautiful Boy is streaming on Prime. I recommend it. It's worth seeing. And my instinct is that most people will actually like it more than I did. It's very, very strong stuff. And Timothée Chalamet could have gotten an Oscar nomination for that movie. That's how good he is. He is phenomenal. Supporting actor, he knocks it out of the park. He could have easily gotten a supporting actor nomination. Just an extraordinary performance in a solid film. I give it 3 stars out of 4, but thumbs up and worth seeing. This has been episode 205 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 206 real soon.